Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. For the next half hour, we will be choosing the right blueberries for your project. A recipe for accessibility success. As many of you may know, we often use this example of baking a blueberry muffin to illustrate how accessibility needs to be part of an early process. We need to put the blueberries in the batter to make sure that they get in the final result. You can't easily add blueberries to a muffin after it's already been baked. That is, unless you're a baking surgeon. When we are thinking about accessibility, we can get stressed out, overwhelmed at the problems before us that may seem insurmountable at times. But I'm here to talk to you about a strategy that works wonders. Together, we're going to learn how to plan accessibility that will create glorious blueberry muffins in the end. So welcome to my accessibility kitchen, where we're going to whip up some amazing accessibility blueberry muffins before our project timer goes off. I'm Mila Pavlin, the design director of UX and accessibility at Monolith, and the former lead UX on God of War PC and God of War Ragnarok. I'm now working with this amazing group of pro accessibility people on Wonder Woman game. I didn't always work in games, however. I began my accessibility journey working with artists with progressive and long-term disabilities. While working there, I began to see the impact that accessible technology had on the lives of artists. I didn't know it at the time, but this would be one of the most important parts of my journey. It's the understanding that we are making something for people, and this is something that can impact people's lives. Games are an integral part of our society now, and they help us to form social bonds with others. Accessibility opens up doors to more than just entertainment. Accessibility can promote friendships, positive social outlooks, and bonds with friends and family. So we hold a lot of weight. We hold an important part, not just as designers, but as moral and ethical people. Don't get overwhelmed. We don't get there overnight, and I think that you likely already have all the ingredients that you need to make things better. Many of you may be experienced bakers, or some of you may just be putting on the apron for the first time. But I know we all share something. When staring at a project, it can be super overwhelming to look at hundreds of features that are out there and all the accessible games and think, how am I ever going to get there? How can our game be more accessible when we just have so much to do and we don't really have the budget to do it? Let me tell you, I was there too. I was staring at a blank slate, was so far ahead, and I just needed to take a step back, take a look at what we already had. When we approach our accessibility kitchen, we can reduce stress and move forward with confidence by being prepared at the start. We'll source some recipes so that we know what kind of baked goods we're trying to make and what our players like. We're going to scour our game code and find out what engine ingredients we have on hand. So if we need to make some substitutions or something doesn't quite work out, we can move quickly to replace it without having to buy all these ingredients up front. We'll invite team members to be sous chefs and prep cooks so that we aren't the only ones in the kitchen. But most important, we're going to learn to be measured so we don't burn out and we don't burn our fellow bakers. We might all think that we're alone in trailblazing, and in some organizations that might be true, but rest assured there are many accessibility designers who are probably watching this right now who have recipes. They've been doing this before, and those recipes might save you time, might save you some trouble, especially if you're working on a small budget. If a solution is out there that's already been solved, don't be afraid to reach out to see if you can get guidance. I personally like to start my recipes from scratch by asking players what they're looking for. Who are my players? What do they enjoy and what do they need? This can be incredibly helpful when you're looking at what recipes already exist and what recipes can be improved upon. Maybe what needs to be created from scratch. I think of this stage as my test kitchen, where you draft up some ideas, you sit down with players, and you go back and forth until you can make something that they can taste test the results of. We sometimes use affinity mapping to define our accessibility goals. Although I can recommend that you get as many people as possible from the accessibility community, even a small group, 5, 10, 20 people can be a great start. During this research study, we can prompt our participants to test against an array of situations from our project. Of course, if you have a playable demo, then that can really help with playtesting. But if you're just in the conceptual stage, which I hope that you're doing this when you're in that stage, you can give examples of proposed gameplay. Get feedback from the players, record everything, and transfer all that feedback into some kind of a sortable format. We're going to use these to build our recipes. Use index cards, you can use online programs like virtual post-its or things that you can move around very quickly to sort things. Although we might think that we know a lot about accessibility, we can never assume that we have all the answers without the community. The player is the one who uses the features, who gets frustrated when the design is lacking, and who gets lost in the setting menu list because there's too many options. We need to understand the player's needs and test designs against their statements. Always make sure that we bring designs to playtest so that we're never left wondering, what did we do wrong? When you ship a game, you should understand what you did right. You should understand what you could have done better. Our mission is to measure and identify all these issues and apply accessible design to the problems in a priority order. We will need to start sorting and separating out our design into digestible categories. You personally can have as many categories as you want. In this example, I'm doing a simple sort into 4 groups since this aligned with our existing game development department structures and would be easier to coordinate work between department heads. We'll get to that in a minute. Your sort will be whatever works for you. Players might make statements like, I need to understand dialogue with sound turned off. Or, I need to be able to read text from a distance. Or they might want controls that are easy to use. Or a player might be frustrated because they need to relearn game mechanics after taking a break. You'll notice that we define these problem statements into wants and needs rather than a list of features. Features are one solution and sometimes very needed. But if we can find design solutions that are integrated, then it becomes more universal. I want to address that point specifically because understanding the relationship between features and integrated design is very important for accessibility. Features are what we typically think about when we talk about accessibility, and they benefit many players and give choice to players. However, as accessibility has grown over the last few years, we are beginning to see that huge sets of features are difficult to parse and difficult to navigate, and this creates its own accessibility barrier. They're like frozen blueberries. They work in a pinch, and they'll get players there, but they require some extra steps, like potentially having to thaw out the blueberries. Although frozen blueberries can be good as a dessert. But sometimes they don't leave a good impression because of a lack of freshness. They might seem stale because they've been in a lot of other games, and how can we update them to make them feel more fresh? Integrated designs are like those fresh blueberries. Players get the benefit and don't necessarily need to do any extra work to get there. Each recipe will call for different ingredients, so make sure to look out for ways that you can move things from frozen to fresh whenever you can. But remember that any blueberry is better than no blueberry. Our goal is not to have the most features. It is to simply add accessibility so that we can look at these two metrics. What are blockers? Things that prevent a player from participating in the game. And what can increase agency or player choice in the game. So as we start picking our blueberry actions, remember that we can accomplish more by making something baked into the design rather than adding it as an option later. With your problem statements in hand, you can now start turning those into action recipes. Each problem statement can be measured against an existing recipe to see if that tech already exists. Like subtitles and captions, most games have some kind of functional system. This is not a definitive list. This is just examples, and putting a definitive list on screen would be a little overwhelming, so don't think of it as the be-all and end-all. You'll have your own sort based on your game and your development partners and what your engine can do. We can, however, find example recipes from other games that might be best practices, like having large format subtitles with customization, having direction indicators, tons of great examples of this. They're very standard to have on other games. With our best practices like having screen reader at any time we have text, or having control remapping, or having smart reference pages for tutorials, and some really good onboarding, you're just going to get into a good situation with your game, and these things are good for everyone. We know that anything we put in these top two categories are likely going to have the expertise from the studio, have great examples, and they're going to be relatively easy for us to get our leadership on board with. As you move down the list, however, you may find that there are new or innovative things that you want to add in. These might require a little more investment from leadership, design, and production. And likely they'll have fewer examples from outside sources, so doing this pre-sort will help us to identify what is going to be low risk and easy for us to push through, and what is going to be high risk in which we might have to make choices about what we are going to fight for. So, now that you have all this in problem statements and a wish list, you can do a little sleuthing in your engineering kitchen. What we're looking for is other ingredients that are already available to you in your kitchen that are secretly blueberries. We'll call those avocados. In the course of development, most engines design and build huge numbers of dev tools that are used to test levels, design features, and give devs power to alter the game state at will. Guess what? Those avocados, they might be blueberries in disguise. Some of your recipes might already have pre-made plugins. Your engine might have something built in as a debug feature that with a little polish and presentation you can just expose to a player. These become super easy wins. The best part of this sleuthing is that you get to talk to your engineers. And as you talk to your engineers, you might find that those items that you put on your high impact and cutting edge bucket list might be easier than you thought. There are many times in which I've talked to an engineer and they've said, oh, I can just flip this switch, or I can just do this thing and it'll work. Those are huge wins and they lead to great success. These easy wins can set the groundwork for future accessibility inclusion. In past projects, we found dozens of dev tools that were already solving problems, and we just had to harness them for their value. Take things like the on-screen controller. We were doing playtests all the time with this controller on screen so that our combat designers could see the button presses that were being given as inputs as the players played. Well, a playtester expressed that they couldn't always tell what button they were pressing and that the on-screen indication actually helped them to align their finger properly on the buttons. With this, we turned that around and gave players control of showing and hiding that controller. This turned out to be a huge win, not just for the accessibility community, but for streamers as well, because now they could show their button presses to prove that they were doing the best combinations on their stream. Win-win. Some of the best features were built on DevTools. Since much of the work was already there, we didn't always have to think about what we had to do from scratch. Sometimes the best answer is to use what you already have. Setting up your team with confidence and success changes the conversation internally from impossible to possible. So that brings us to finding the team members who can be your champions while you're not in the room. It doesn't matter how many accessibility blueberries you plan if you can't get them into game. And on this road to accessibility, you are not always in the room. And when you're not there, you may find that many people just don't think blueberries belong in muffins. They are, of course, wrong. Unless they're allergic to blueberries, and then we can substitute something else out in this example. Prep cooks are your eyes and ears on other teams who can take on those fights, who can take on implementation, and who can guide conversation to make sure that blueberries are getting added. And it is vital that these things are added when decisions are being made. They also might come up with some ideas that you never thought of. You as an individual can only get so far, and your influence alone fighting against a system may only get you a small percentage of the way. However, once you start identifying champions, there is a massive uptick in the ability of the team to get things done. There is still a chunk of work that will require dedicated staff and budget, but I bet you today, with a little help from other teams, you could get a lot done. Don't try and be a solo chef in the kitchen. Find allies in the organization and distribute that work so that you can prove the value of accessibility, which will then help you to get budget for the rest of the way. Leadership likes success, so that support will help to make that happen. Remember, your success depends on the support of your team members, kitchen leadership, and outreach from marketing. If you can convince your team members, then you can convince leadership. And if leadership can support accessibility publicly and internally, you can turn that in to garner a ton of internal support and external support. Even having a simple statement to the team from leadership that leadership values accessibility can change an internal fight for accessibility into a working conversation. This is the same for marketing for your game. No matter how accessible your game is, if no one knows that it's accessible, how are they going to try your amazing blueberry muffins? Work with your marketing team to make sure your game's trailers and social media posts include accessibility, and that you're part of a formal plan to release information about accessibility before the game launches. Get your company invested in accessibility. So you go from being an ordinary game studio to an accessibility game studio. If you have a reputation for accessibility, leadership will be more invested, teams will be more invested, marketing will be more invested, and the studio will start to attract more accessibility-minded people, making the process of making these blueberry muffins all the better. Each time a player has a success or failure with your game, it will lead to more learning. This leads to more recipes, this leads to more success, and the more team members you have watching this, the more you're going to learn. So, one warning here. We need to be measured. We need to be measured in our approach and take things one step at a time. If you personally take on too much all at once, you will burn out. Burnout is a real thing, and you might think that you're immune, but I guarantee you will hit a point in which it just becomes too much. We see it all the time. And this is something that we saw as early as when I was working back at that organization that was assisting artists, is that the caretakers and those folks that were helping with accessibility ended up being the ones that burnt out the fastest because they see all of the problems that need to be fixed and take it on personally. We have to be smart, and we have to choose what we do and when we do it. Planning our big and complex accessibility actions early can save us on having to sit in the heat at the end of the project. We can create a timeline for ourselves that goes from our design phase all the way to our final push. We start to plan out our menu, gathering feedback and planning actions in the design phase. Here we can also get quick wins from those development features that we talked about. These are areas where we have a high risk tolerance. We can try things out. We can make mistakes. We can do some of those extremely cool things in small batches just to prove that they can work. And if we can prove it, they might just make it in. In pre-pro, we should be working on the hardest and most difficult and complex designs, making sure that we're testing and tuning and building them out piece by piece. This can be a challenge from a vision standpoint because you have to understand that the results may not show up right away. Just like baking, things that we put in early could take a while and be later in the process before we actually see the results. As we head towards our vertical slice, we start bringing in those medium complexity actions that have strong value and are easily adaptable. This way we can adjust our baking based on what the community needs, so that as we push towards the end, we're reducing the complexity of the things that we need to create. By the time we reach alpha, we should have well-baked accessibility at the core of our design. And we're just looking to add some quick toppings to make sure that community feedback is addressed. This is where we start tuning and polishing. In our final push, we should really be only focused on bug fixing and fine-tuning those high priority items to make sure that our risk tolerance is much lower and we're looking to resolve issues in things that we already have in the game. Now you might be saying, this looks great, but we won't ever get the budget for blueberries this early on. Our leadership doesn't believe in that. They don't see the value. Here is a chart showing the tragedy of late starts. This is true for many UX issues as well. Early on, we have lots of choice and almost no cost. By the end, we have very few, perhaps no choices, and a huge cost to implement any changes. Risk increases as a project goes on, and anything that is not in early will be expensive and time-consuming as you go towards the end of the project. Early accessibility dollars pay for themselves and actually save the company money. So be confident and push for those amazing features early. If you need help selling your leadership on the return of investment for accessibility, reach out to me. Happy to talk to you about how we talked about it and why there's such a huge benefit for accessibility. So, in summary, if you take anything away from this talk, just be confident in accessibility. Regardless of how overwhelming a project might seem, if you follow this recipe, you can find out what you need. Leverage what you already have. Build partnerships with team members and plan out well in advance so that you don't burn out. Our first batch of blueberry muffins is never going to be perfect, and there's always room for improvement. But like a great chef once told me, you can't make a blueberry muffin if you don't start baking. Get out there, make some amazing blueberry muffins. Let's make all games have no limits. Thank you very much. I've been Mila Pavlin. Find me online at Misfire4 if you have any questions, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.